So the truce appears to have survived its first real test and is holding for the time being. But what of the future, and could it pave the way for a more lasting peace? Now, here with me to discuss that is Matt Brodsky, Policy Director of the Jewish Policy Center, and Adel Iskandar, an Adjunct Professor at Georgetown University, right here in Washington. Gentlemen, thanks to both of you for joining us. Matt, let me start with you. I mean, we have this agreement. Now, besides the fact that we just have a cessation of hostilities, what exactly did this agreement achieve? You know, both sides are giving us different stories. You hear Hamas saying, hey, we got a lot of concessions. You hear the Israelis saying, well, beyond the cessation of hostilities, beyond the stopping of the guns going off, nothing else.
That actually seems to be enough for the moment. And if a ceasefire endures for a few years, then that will be plenty well. The cessation of rocket fire was non-negotiable from an Israeli perspective, and restoring some of its deterrence perspective. So they did that, and they were able to decapitate a few of the Hamas leadership people, and they demonstrated the effectiveness of their Iron Dome missile defense system. So how this leads to or back towards the peace process, I don't see that as happening. I think it was more of a mowing of the grass that needed to happen, and Hamas was the weed.
Adel, I mean, how fragile is this agreement? I mean, are we going to see a resumption of hostilities very soon?
I think probably one of the problems that this whole situation faces is the fact that there is an unevenness in the discourse. Exactly what Matt said is precisely the problem. The fact that taking down the leaders, the military leaders of Hamas is considered mowing the lawn. There is a systematic dehumanization of the Palestinian existence inside Gaza. And that is the structural problem, that Hamas and other factions will continue to resist so long as their existence is perceived as of limited value in the eyes of the international community. So this is Hamas basically trying to legitimize themselves. So if anything has come out of the ceasefire for Hamas as a political party that's been cornered and suffocated for quite some time, is to legitimize them. They now have Morsi on their side, if you will, basically backing them up and propping them up so that they can give the kind of hyperbolic, victorious speeches for just a cessation of violence, just to legitimize themselves. So this is a major victory in the eyes of Hamas, that they are now a political party that needs to be acknowledged and to be negotiated with, and compared to their counterparts in Fatah, who have basically disappeared into oblivion in comparison.
Right, Matt, 2 points there. One is legitimacy for Hamas, as Adel is pointing out. The other, a systematic dehumanization of Palestinians, as he pointed out.
It's the delegitimizing of shooting rockets at civilians, if that's what resistance is considered. There wouldn't be any Israeli action if there were no rockets coming out of Gaza, period. And Hamas is responsible for Gaza, if you're talking about delegitimization. To your first point, what was your first?
I mean, the other was systematic dehumanization of Palestinians.
Yeah, the systematic dehumanization of Israelis going on in Gaza and in the Palestinian Authority is fairly intense compared to anything that Israel might do. I don't think that that's it's not delegitimizing them. I think the point is that, much like in Cast Lead, Israel had to go in and take care of rocket installations and smuggling tunnels, and then they had to do that again now, and that is likely to happen again in the future because Hamas doesn't seem ready to recognize Israel as a state or to recognize Israel's right to exist. So until that happens, there's not going to be anything done at the negotiating table, and this will likely happen again.
Okay, Adel?
I mean, the problem is it's the very discourse that begins with. I mean, the idea of mowing the lawn implies that the majority of people who have lost their lives in this particular conflict are members of Hamas militias. All you have to do is look at the casualties and the fatalities. The majority are innocent civilians, and this is problematic. So I can understand that Israel has interests that it needs to protect, but the language, the public relations language of the Israel machinery is deeply problematic, and it's being delegitimized continuously.
You can't seriously be having a debate on Palestinian delegitimization of Israel in his textbooks.
Mowing the lawn when you have children who have been killed. I mean,
squares being named after terrorists in Palestinian society. I mean, listen, this is not like apples and oranges here.
There are the heroes to one group are the freedom fighters for another.
I'm sorry, but someone who blows up themselves on a bus or just launches rockets can't be considered a freedom fighter.
When was the last time something
like this? It's considered a terrorist.
When was the last time something of this sort has happened in Israel since the withdrawal from Gaza?
When was the last time something like
like something of the sort. Someone blowing themselves up inside Israeli territory. I think that there's
aside from the bomb that was lobbed into the bus in Tel Aviv a few days ago, that seems to be...
Nobody has, Hamas has not taken credit for it. Islamic Jihad hasn't taken credit for it.
Apparently Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigade, the more moderate...
I think to a large extent there's a disproportionality. If you look at the amount of munition used on Gaza on a continuous basis and the number of people in the face of this threat, 1.5 million people in the face of this kind of fire, versus the extremely low grade and practically negligible impact that this kind of missiles have.
Love to talk about
I just want to get to one other point, and that is the fact that Hamas seems to have a lot more recognition now from Egypt. I mean, and one also has to look at the impact that the Arab Spring is going to have on these negotiations, on finally resolving this conflict.
Right.
How does Israel respond to that?
Well, the Arab upheaval has certainly shifted the entire dynamic in the Middle East. And that is what brings this about. So that you have the Muslim Brotherhood leading now in Egypt, and that's where you had Hamas come from to begin with as an ideological component. Of course, they were going to be more supportive than say, Mubarak. So, I mean, that Hamas is being considered more legitimized, it doesn't really make a difference. It doesn't actually change anything. What they need is money, and maybe Qatar will pony up some money. Maybe they'll get some money from Turkey, but it doesn't fundamentally change anything in the dynamic of the Palestinian-Israeli conflict.
Okay, Adel, there's a big elephant in the room, and that is the peace treaty between Israel and Egypt. Will it be held hostage to this process?
I think to a large extent the parties to the treaty have agreed to maintain the majority of its substance intact. Morsi is in no position to actually threaten both the Israelis and the Americans with any major action when it comes to the treaty, but he understands full well that his constituency inside Egypt are expecting immediate results. At the very least, to allow for increased deployment inside Sinai, which he's gotten a little bit,
right.
And also opening up the border with Gaza to allow for some degree of free movement between Gaza and Egypt, but more importantly, things like the gas treaty with Israel and Jordan, which of course is sold at minimal cost in a country that is suffering from economic crisis and a downward spiral. So in essence, there has to be some sort of a recalculation. I think the Israelis might be prepared to accept very, very modest modifications to the treaty, but the very structure of the treaty will continue to stand so long as the American administration is propping it up.
Okay, gentlemen, we're going to have to leave it there. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.